I want to talk to you about having a difficult daughter-in-law. And I know from what I hear from you that there are a lot of you that do, and it's a very, very difficult thing. It can be even heartbreaking, especially when it affects your relationship with your grandchildren. But let's talk about first the characteristics of what we commonly see is a difficult daughter-in-law. The first is she's reactive to everything, very sensitive. She takes offense at the smallest thing. You don't think you've done anything wrong. You've done the same thing that you did with her, with your other daughter-in-law, or with friends, or with your son, or with other people, and no problem. Nobody says anything, nobody's bothered, but she's offended. Next one is she's jealous of you and your relationship with your son, her husband. She feels competition with that. She's jealous of the time he spends with you. She's jealous of him coming over on his own. She tries to pull him away from you, and you can feel that. You can see that that's going on. She does not like you around him all the time. And when you are, she is kind of there. She doesn't let you have time alone with him. Next one is competitive between you and her mom. So she's going to want to make sure that her relationship with her mom has more time than the time with you. She wants you to know that her relationship with her mom is really good and that she's spending time with her mom, and she's talking about my mom a lot. And so you just feel like her mom is kind of in between the relationship with you, not because her mother puts herself there, but because your daughter-in-law keeps wanting to make you feel like everything she needs comes from her mom. Next one is she's protective of her mom and their family. So she's not necessarily, maybe you had this dream of being close to your daughter-in-law's family, and you'd all get together, the in-laws family, your daughter-in-law's family, your family, all big one happy thing. You and the mother-in-law, her mother and you are going to be good friends. And so you find that she kind of holds them aside, keeps them away from you, doesn't want them to kind of be mixing, doesn't really want you to get to know them. Also, possessive of her kids. If she has children, you can tell that she's kind of paying attention. How much are you around them? How close do you get with them? If you get really close with them, she's jealous, she's uncomfortable, she'll pull them away from you. She just wants to let you know, like, these are my kids and they're not yours, and you're not going to be able to have them as much as you want them. And you can just feel this tug of war and this pull between her letting you be around her kids, your grandkids. And then she's resentful. She holds resentments and grievances. So there's little things, all those things that have built up that happened that she took offense to, they're not resolved. And worse than that, you can't resolve them, because when you try to explain to her, I didn't mean that, you took that wrong, that's not what I was saying, she does not feel better. She, in fact, can get worse. Then she gets resentful about what you're saying to try to fix it, and then it just blows up. So you are in a position where you feel like, oh my, I am so disappointed. So here are some of the hopes that you probably had for this relationship, some of your myths. You believed when your daughter-in-law came into your life that she's gonna love your family. She's just gonna love all of you, and that she's going to be like a daughter to you, and that you're gonna still be as close to your son as you've ever been. So it's just gonna be adding to your family. When you believe those things and it doesn't happen, and the opposite happens, there's all this stress and this strain, it is really devastating. So you've got to look at those myths and say, I believed this, but this isn't reality. It's not my reality. Trust me, you're not alone. I wish I could say there's only one person out there that this video would apply to, but that's not the case. So you got to look at those myths, and you've got to let those go. You're going to do some grieving over the loss of those hopes and dreams, because that's not the way it's going to be. Now, where's your son fit in all of this? Well, he's married to her. And what that means is the same personality that you're dealing with, that you notice these things that I just went over, these difficulties, your son lives with that. Your grandchildren, that's their mom. So your son is, you might say, I'm so hurt that my son doesn't care that she's pushing us off, and doesn't care that she doesn't treat us right, and doesn't care that she doesn't bring the kids around, doesn't care that this is how she is. But your son lives with her. Your son has to take the same personality that you deal with once in a while, and he's got to deal with it every day. So when that means she's getting upset with him over things that he doesn't think he did wrong. She's getting upset with him a lot. He's got to kind of walk on eggshells to not set her off. He is hearing, if she's talking about it, which she likely is, her complaints about you. And if he sides with you against her, then he's even in more trouble. So it's not going to be safe for him to side with you. And as long as he's at that place where he's not even dealing with his own marriage difficulties, there's no way, I'm just going to be honest with you, no way that he is going to be able to rock the boat and take a strong stand for you. So you have to assume that he will not be able to take a stand for anything with you until he takes a stand first in his own marriage. Know that. And then one more important thing, because this has burned a lot of people, assume that anything that you say to your son about your daughter-in-law, he is going to tell her. So if you go to him and you say, honey, she's difficult, she takes offense to everything, she's all these things, can't you please, assume he's going to tell her. Because if you don't make that assumption and he does, you will have said things that you are going to regret. And why does he tell her? He tells her because he's aligned with her. He tells her because he's trying to make things better with her. He tells her because he's trying to maybe in that moment think he can fix it if he tells her what you're upset about. That's not going to work. So assume that and be careful and don't say something that will make the situation worse. Now, you have to look at you, because your history and your personality and all this, whether you feel like you didn't do anything wrong and you didn't cause this, you did nothing but wonderful and generous and sweet and accepting, you are part of it. Your personality comes into this. And what I know from personal experience with my own in-law family, marrying into my husband's family, and my own issues and their issues, is that when you bring yourself in that reactivity to it, it's like lighting a spark, taking a spark, and it lights a fire. Because the more emotional, reactive, and annoyed you are with this, and the more stiff or uncomfortable, the worse that the situation gets. So you've got to look at what this is triggering in you, how this is making you feel upset, what the losses are. Does this remind you of a childhood loss? Does this remind you of what you experienced when you went into your marriage with your husband, and you know, you or your wife, if you're a man listening to this? Most of the time this is mother-in-law, daughter-in-law. So you've got to look at that. You've got to look at your energy. If you're uncomfortable, are you leading that energy? Sometimes we have to act in relationships like this. We have to put on an act, like we're okay, we're not bothered, we're just laid back, we're easy, even though inside we're struggling. Sometimes acting as if is the best way to diffuse something. If you're too needy, too anxious, too pushy, it's going to come through and you are going to make this worse. You also cannot feel like a victim and that you're powerless. If you literally complain to your friends, there's nothing I can do, she doesn't like me, she can do this, she can do that, it's horrible, it's awful, you are going to increase all of those emotions and that stuff, and that is going to increase that energy. You've got to look at this as, okay, so I've got a difficult situation. My daughter-in-law has some issues. I've got to try to figure out how to make the best of this and make my actions right so that I don't make it worse. And I'm going to look at the options that I have and not feel like a victim, but feel like a person who can exercise the choices that I have. It's a mental thing that will help you feel less negative about it. The next one is you don't want to overreact. You don't want to go off on her. You don't want to tell her everything that you think. You don't want to overreact and be too intense and really demanding. Give me those kids. You never let me have the kids. You let your mother have them all the time. It's not fair, because you'll be blamed for everything. You will get the blame for the entire problem, and your son will have to side with her because you overreacted. So don't. Vent to your friends, vent to a therapist, vent to your spouse. Don't vent onto your daughter-in-law or your son-in-law or your son, because he's going to tell her. Underreact meaning you pretend, even to yourself. You tell yourself, that's fine, it's okay, it doesn't bother me. No, if it bothers you, you need to deal with it. If it's upsetting you, you need to talk to somebody about it. You need to get the feelings out, but you just got to be careful who. Maybe not to your son, maybe not to her, most of the time. The next one is unrealistic expectations. You got to look at your expectations of yourself. Do you expect yourself to be perfect and not to be bothered by any of it? Or do you expect yourself, what do you expect about you? What do you expect of your son? Do you expect your son to be loyal to you and stand up for you against his wife over everything? Okay, what did you expect of your daughter-in-law? Did you expect her to love you and treat you like a mom? You got to look at that, because anytime we have unrealistic, unmet expectations, it causes intensity in our relationships, because it causes pain, causes disappointment, it causes us to be angry and irritated with people. So look at those expectations, work through them, get rid of the unrealistic expectations. You've got to do that. If you don't, they're going to cause it to be harder for you to deal with this. So the other thing is, now, what can you do? How do you handle this? Well, first of all, I want you to think two things. One, I want you to think about your daughter-in-law and what the limitations are with her. I want you to think of them as limitations that you have to take into consideration anytime that you deal with her. The realities. This is your reality. So considering your reality, right? You want to think of who she is. And when you offer help, or you offer, like, take the kids if you need them, whatever, do it casually, not pushy specifically, unless there's a specific day that you really would, my sister's coming into town with her kids, her grandkids, would it be okay if that day they came over? Always ask it as a would it be okay? Make it open-ended. Keep your emotional reactivity down. As I said, I don't care what it takes. If you have to act, pretend, vent with your friends before you come over. And you, like I said, you want to offer open-ended requests so that you do not sound controlling or demanding, because controlling and demanding will trigger a daughter-in-law like this. If you sense things are getting bad and increased in intensity, you might want to just back off for a little while. Maybe not call for a while, maybe, and you really want to kind of let her set the pace of the relationship, and not you be the one that's trying to force everything to be a certain way, like, oh, we have to go to lunch together once a week. That's what mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws do. You might want to let her set the pace. You deal with your child with requests, if possible, unless your daughter-in-law gets upset over that and feels like you're doing it behind her back. But if possible, do it with both of them. Like, maybe you could text both of them. Can we have the kids come over, or can you all come over this weekend anytime, because Aunt Joe's coming into town? And so text them both. If your son asks you not to text her, then go along with what your son asked you. If she asks you only to text her and not involve him, you got to go along with that, unless you bring it up and you talk about it and you say, this is why this bothers me. Why is this a problem? Let's talk. Now, that is the other thing. Before you say anything, have any confrontation, bring any conflict, any concern to light, try to defend yourself, explain anything, think it through. Count the cost. What are the repercussions of doing that, of not doing that? Will you be super resentful? Will it be unresolved? Or will it blow up and become an even bigger issue? You got to think of her problem-solving skills, of the way that she's responded in the past, and you got to weigh it and make a wise decision. Don't go in to confront and talk about anything without first doing that. You want to keep your life full of things you love. Do not make your relationship with your son, your daughter-in-law, and your grandkids the center of your life. All of us have to understand that empty nest is empty nest. That means not, what is our expectation? Is it, oh, my kids are going to leave and then my whole life is going to be full with my adult children and their grandchildren? Is that your expectation? Because that might not be what's going to happen. And if that's the case, you've got to have a full life you love, whether it's traveling, whether it's a new interest, vocation, passion, volunteer thing, whatever that is, just fun, I don't know. Do it. Get a life. Get a life for you. The next one is you're going to have some things that you don't tolerate. You're not going to tolerate pure disrespect or abuse or things that are just completely over the line. I'm not saying to tolerate everything. I'm not saying that you have to put up with anything and everything. You got to work through grieving the loss of the hopes and dreams. I mean, anything that we hope for that doesn't happen is a loss. And we have to go through denial, anger, bargaining. Well, if only I do this, maybe this will work out. If only I do this, maybe that. Sadness, which is the feeling the loss and understanding the significance of that. And then finally, acceptance. When you get to where you accept the situation, this is who your son married. Until he deals with this in his marriage first, he will not be able to deal with this with us and stand up for us. So accept that loss, go into acceptance, and now what? Acceptance says, this is what it is, now what? What can I do with this? How do I best handle this? How do I deal with this now that this is my reality? That's how you do that. You also want to decide, what is my primary goal? If your primary goal is not to be, at this point, given the situation, not to be super close to your daughter-in-law, but maintain a good relationship with her and your son to where you can see your grandkids, make your choices based on that. Make your choices of how much you confront. And if you know that that relationship with her is never going to be good because she's not going to be close to you, she's not going to be anything but sensitive, then you can be cordial and be nice and be friendly, but maintain just enough of that relationship where you can still, she's comfortable with you having your grandkids in your life. You got to figure it out. What is your primary goal? And based on that, that's what is going to guide you to what you're going to bring up, what type of conflict resolution you're going to have in the relationship, how much you're going to overlook, all of that. And then the next one is to set boundaries for what you will and will not do. You know, there might be some things that you're just not going to do. I know one woman who had a really difficult daughter-in-law, and she had just literally been there. No matter what happened, she would wipe her calendar clean last minute to babysit those kids. She would just put everything aside. And she realized that she was starting to get resentful because she would do that and then something would happen and the kids would be pulled away from a while and she wouldn't get to see them. So she had to learn that, hey, you know, I'm going to act respectfully. One thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to clear my calendar. If I've already got something, even though I desperately want to see those kids, I'm going to say, I'm sorry, I can't watch them because I've already got plans. So she at least decided that rather than having this big confrontation, here, see, note this, instead of saying, you always call me last minute and I always put all my plans aside and I'm not going to do that anymore because you don't give me enough notice. You can imagine how that's going to blow up with this kind of daughter-in-law. So this woman knew better than to bring that up, but for herself, she made the decision. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm just going to very nicely say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I would love to see them, but I've already got plans. So that's putting that message out. You're going to have to call me ahead of time and give me notice because I might be busy, and without stirring it up. So that's how you use wisdom in how you handle this. Now, the last one is very important, and that is compassion. Always having compassion will help us in dealing with difficult people. Your daughter-in-law, in order to be like this, to be this person is struggling, believe it or not. You may not believe it, but she is. Anytime anybody has this jealousy and this competition and this insecurity and this possessiveness, there's stuff churning inside of her. It is not a fun way to be. It is an emotional struggle. She's struggling. Have compassion. Don't hate her. Don't have building up all this resentment toward her. Understand that there's something going on inside of her that is causing her to be this way, and that it is most likely from brokenness, from pain in the past. It may be in her childhood, maybe just in her emotional makeup, things that have happened to her. Have compassion and pray for her. Pray for her, your son, and pray for this wisdom and discernment, like I said, to figure out how best to navigate this difficult relationship, because it will affect how close, I shouldn't say close because you can't guarantee it'll be a close relationship with your son, but how much they're in your life. And if your goal is to have them in your life as much as possible, given the circumstance, then choose wisely. Thank you for watching this video on Change My Relationship. And if you really heard a lot of things in this that made you feel like, oh my gosh, I need to work on that, need to work on that. Every one of my videos, my books, and my studies that talk about difficult relationships, you can learn from, because they're all things that teach people to deal with difficult people and difficult relationships. So you've got plenty more to watch, not just this one, because it's the only one that is labeled daughter-in-law. Okay? All right. Thank you.